History? Like that's gonna give me a job.
History is written by dead white males. At least that's what I've heard.
History sucks. I think history's a waste of time.
History's kind of irrelevant.
The world has changed. We live by new rules.
I think history is for nerds.
Okay, so there's no doubt about it. A lot of people see history as an outdated and generally useless pursuit. In general, a waste of time. Some of those people are educators, but not everybody does. Here, for instance, is Preston Manning, the man who founded the conservative movement in Western Canada, which would one day become national and win 3 consecutive general elections. But Manning himself is not a politician. He's an economist, and he heads up the highly influential Manning Center in Calgary. Now, here's what he has to say about the value of history.
There are some people who feel that history is of no importance, but there is a smaller number of people who believe it is of enormous importance and an enormous advantage to know what went before if you have to deal with the present and the future. There's such a thing as a historical mindset, and I would contend that people who have that historical mindset, a grasp of history, will do better in the present and the future than those who do not. There used to be an event in the Olympics called the standing broad jump, where you tried to jump ahead from a standing position, and the furthest anyone got was about 7 feet. There is still an event in the Olympics called the long jump, or the running broad jump, where you get a run before you jump, and the record in that event is some 27 or 28 feet. In other words, the simple lesson is that you can get further ahead if you get a run at it than if you start from standing still. And what a knowledge of history is that getting a run at what went before so that you can get further ahead in the present.
Or listen to Murray Lytle, the Calgary mining engineer, who has led the development of major mining operations all over the world.
Well, you heard Preston talk about the history mindset. I'd like to offer another perspective. History, you see, is a tool that can be used to make decisions strategically. It's a tool that is only available if you understand history. And in business, after all, is nothing but making strategic decisions when you don't have all of the information. And why would anybody make those decisions without having the vast panoply of history to help them, give them a context for making such decisions? If I were, for example, to need a project engineer to do some work in a country like, say, for example, Peru, and I had 3 candidates that were all equal in all respects in terms of their academic credentials, their work history, and they all spoke Spanish fluently, how could I make this decision? I have 3 very excellent candidates. Well, if one of those candidates also understood the history of Peru, understood how Pizarro came and conquered the country in the 1500s, perhaps had some understanding of the great agrarian reform of the 1970s, maybe understood the slaughter of the Sendero Luminoso period, then clearly I'm going to want to take that candidate who has such a heightened cultural sensitivity and an understanding of their history. So I leave it to you kids. You have an opportunity to take a wonderful program to teach yourselves or to learn history, give yourselves a leg up in the business world. I think you should take the opportunity, but it's your decision at the end of the day.
Or finally, Jason Kenney, a key figure in the federal cabinet, viewed by many as the next prime minister.
History is the single most important subject to study if you want to be involved in politics. Aristotle, one of the most important political theorists, said that politics is the art of free people deliberating on the question of how we ought to order our lives together. If you want to enter that deliberation, you need to understand how it's developed over the centuries. You need to understand the basic concepts and how they have actually been applied in different historical circumstances. For example, here in Canada, if you get elected to a legislature or to Parliament, you're becoming part of an institution that has changed organically over centuries. You need to understand how that institution, the Westminster parliamentary system, came to be. You need to understand the struggle between the authority of the Crown and the Commons. G.K. Chesterton once told us that tradition is the democracy of the dead. We need to understand the wisdom of those who have gone before us if we actually want to contribute in a meaningful way to contemporary political issues. I can tell you, I've been in Parliament for almost 20 years, and there is not a single issue I have encountered which is completely new. Every issue we encounter, from healthcare to economic management, from foreign policy to security issues, all of these are echoes. All of these issues that we address have precedent. All of them are based on things that have happened before. So I would say that if anyone's interested in engaging in the political sphere, the single most important subject to study is that of history.
Now, listen carefully for a minute. People who say that history is a waste of time are, in fact, dead wrong. Next, perhaps, to maths and English literature, it's the most valuable subject you can pursue. And right now, here in Alberta, we're offering the grade 10 and 11 students in 22 Christian schools, 11 Catholic and 11 Protestant, an extraordinary opportunity to pursue it. We're not selling anything. It's free, but it will cost you some time, an hour a week, maybe more. However, there's also a reward. From it, you will acquire what we call a history mindset, like the guy that leapt 28 feet instead of 7, like the engineer who got the job, and like the politician who won the election. You will wind up thinking history. In every endeavor you undertake out in the world, you'll find yourself wanting to get the background. Who did this? Or how did that event or institution I'm dealing with come about? Who led it? What is its history? That habit, that mindset will be with you, strengthening you for the rest of your life. And that's the payoff. I head up an Alberta organization that has just completed a series of 12 books covering the whole history of Christianity from Christ's time until today. The books show in fascinating detail exactly how the world that you and I are living in came about. Our world is called Western civilization. It is the most compassionate, most technologically advanced, and affluent civilization the world has ever known. And it is almost entirely a product of the Christian religion. So the history of the Western world and the history of Christianity are essentially the same history. Our organization is the Society to Explore and Record Christian History, for short, SEARCH.
They're addictive. They're written like novels. Any student at a high school level with some interest in history, this is going to pull them in. There's 12 volumes. It takes a while, but it's worth reading them all.
These books are in the library now. There's a stand there.
One of the things that I think is valuable about these books in the Christian history series is that you find they're not trying to whitewash Christian history or the history of Christians. So there's a real honesty to them.
The books are an excellent resource from the point of view is that they give the big picture of history for the Christian faith. My take is that this is the story. Take it or leave it. I think it's time that we as Christians had a book that was written from our perspective. We always get the perspective of people from outside of the church. Now we tell the story from insiders.
And I think those books I do think that they give us a trajectory of the Christian faith, following the time of Christ right up until today.
Students need to know their history. If we don't know our story, then we don't know who we are.
History has a huge role to play. History will help students find their place in God's story.
The books you produced will be very useful to a Christian educator on, I'd say, many different levels. Christianity is a historical faith. It's a faith rooted in history, and if you get rid of history, well then you get rid of Christ, because God became man in history. So many of the attacks on the faith are historical attacks. They're people saying, what happened to Galileo, or the Christians have always hated science, or they're intolerant, or they're bigoted, and it's all based on the historical attacks. And so if you don't know history, well, then how are you going to defend the faith and say, well, no, that's not true. That's not what the record actually says.
These books, I think, would be very useful in the sense that they provide people with a firm background, a background that you might not get often in secular textbooks. And so history books like these, I think, can offer that balanced perspective and help to equip people when discussing and defending the faith.
These books are very useful for Christian education as they present history through a distinctly Christian lens. I think we've been playing with relativism now for quite a few decades, and I think kids are astute, and I think they see that it's empty. Young people want truth. They really do want it. This book series will help us to reinforce that message, that there is such thing as truth. Truth is Christ. Christ is the Lord of history.
You mean I have to read all of this?
So you ask, are you telling me you want us to read 12 300-page volumes? No, we're not.
I'm relieved.
But we are wanting you to read certain designated segments within those volumes. Once a week, we want you to answer 2 questions based on your reading. They are not just fact questions. You'll have to think about what you read before you'll be able to answer them, and express your answers in less than 150 words. Your answers will be read and marked by teachers and professional editors and sent back to you. The best answers will be published, sometimes not always given a cash reward. So, are you with us or not? If you are, your religious studies teacher will give you an application form to fill out and lend you a copy of our Volume 1. If you complete the weekly questions on Volume 1, it's yours to keep, and you will then be lent a copy of Volume 2 on the same terms. If you drop out, you're committed to return the book to the teacher. Meantime, good luck, and may God bless your efforts. I'll be talking to you again before you undertake your first question on Volume 1.